Dave Talks Comics, Episode 60. Dave Talks Comics is a podcast on the subjects of comic books and cartoons. I talk about comics I have read and cartoons I have watched. Dave Talks Comics can be found on the web at davetalkscomics.com and at facebook.com/davetalkscomics. I talk from my notes about comics. I don't go panel by panel. I try to do more than just summarize the stories. And I'm going to divert from the script a little bit here because I'm not going to be talking about comics on this episode, or cartoons, or movies, or conventions. Well, in a way I'm going to be talking about all of them. I want to take a look back at my year, at the past year, at 2014, at taking a look back at my podcast, at what I've covered, how I've covered it, what I want to cover in the future, and yeah, basically a year in review. I haven't really done this. I haven't really taken a look under the hood or pulled back the curtain before on the podcast, or at least not for an entire episode. So I thought this would be a good time to do that. In 2014, I released considerably more episodes. Well, I started the podcast in 2013, and I believe I only got 13 episodes out that year. 2014, I got 46 episodes out. And from the first 4 months, I wasn't too active. I think I only had 5 episodes in the first 4 months. But since then, from May forward, I've done at least 4 episodes per month. I try to space them a week apart. I try to release them on the Saturday or Sunday on the weekend, but I'm not always successful. Other things come in the way, both things I have to do, things I want to do. So sometimes you'll have a couple episodes like the last couple, which will be less than a week apart. Other times, well, blah, blah, blah. You get the idea. So of those 46 episodes, I took a look back, and roughly a third of them were on conventions. I went to 4 conventions this year. I went to Appleseed, which was in Indiana, and in Fort Wayne, Indiana. That was in May. And I did 3 episodes on Appleseed, Comic-Con or Comic Convention or Comic Book Show. I'm not sure what the exact name is. Then in June, I went to Heroes Con in Charlotte. And it was my 3rd time going to Heroes Con. Now, I did 7 episodes on Heroes Con, but 3 of those episodes were just my recordings of panels, basically. And I'll get back to that in a sec. So then I didn't go to any more shows until September, when I went to 2 shows. First, I went to the Baltimore Comic-Con, which was... and I only went for 1 day, but I managed to eke 3 episodes out of this. And part of the reason for that is the way I covered the panels. I went to a number of panels, but I didn't cover them the same way that I did at Heroes Con, where I just recorded the panels and I released that. And I talked a little bit about the panels, but I didn't really go in depth. At Baltimore and also at the next show, what I decided to do, I took notes. I also recorded the panels, but I also took notes. And then on the podcast, I talked about the panel from my notes. And in retrospect, I think I like that a lot better. And although I did make the audio available for those panels, just not in the podcast. It's separately available on my website. And finally, the other show I went to, which was also in September, was the Small Press Expo, which is also in Maryland, in North Bethesda. And I did 2 episodes on the Small Press Expo. Now, I also was there for just 1 day. So the only show that I really went to, well, more than 2 days was Heroes Baltimore, I was just there one day. Small Press Expo one day, and Appleseed, 2 days, or a day and a half. So I've talked a little bit about how I cover the convention panels, and I think that's how I did it for Baltimore and for the Small Press Expo, or SPX, and I think that's how I want to do it going forward. In addition to talking about the panels, I also, of course, talk about the stuff I bought and possibly things I saw. And that's about it, really. Maybe people I met, although I don't really go to the panels to hang out too much, or to the conventions to hang out too much. It's more to buy stuff, to see stuff. And I guess one thing that's worth mentioning is I've really scaled back. Since I started the podcast, I've really scaled back on my purchases of art. I bought a number of pieces at Heroes Con this year, but even there I didn't spend anywhere near as much. I mean, like maybe half of what I spent in prior years. I don't know. I think doing the podcast has kind of changed my focus in some ways when it comes to my interest in comic books and where my money's going. Well, let's put it this way. I'm not spending as much, I don't think, although I haven't done a strict or a financial review to see exactly how much I spent in 2014 yet. But I get the impression I'm not spending as much on books, and I'm certainly not spending as much on art. That I'm positive. So speaking about books, I talked about a number of books on the podcast. And I've kind of grouped them by the era they're from. From what I can see, at the very last episode of the year, I talked about the Doom Patrol from the 1960s, but that was the only comic book that I talked about from the 1960s, although I did mention the Lou Fine Treasury in an earlier episode, which included a lot of stuff from the 1940s. So after the Doom Patrol in the 60s, from the 70s, I talked about Warlock, and these were the Adam Warlock, the Jim Starlin run on the character. I had bought the 1993, I think it was, edition of the reprints that Marvel did of those issues of, was it Strange Tales, I think it was, that he first appeared, well, not that he first appeared in, but that he appeared in, and that where Jim Starlin's run on the book began. Strange Tales, and then it moved to Warlock, and then there was a couple of annuals. I think it was a Marvel 2-in-1 and a Marvel Team-Up, or was it an Avengers annual? No, I think it was a Marvel 2-in-1 and a Marvel Team-Up annual. The other books from the 70s I talked about there were some issues of Spider-Man as well as some issues of Marvel Team-Up from the 70s that I talked about. And there was also some issues of Fantastic Four. I believe those were from the John Byrne Visionaries, Volume 0. From the 80s, I talked about some more issues of Spider-Man. I think there was an annual that I talked about. There was some more issues of the Fantastic Four. There was the Black Hawk miniseries by Howard Chaykin, that 3-issue prestige format. There were some issues of Superman in Action Comics, which included that first story, which had the new Brainiac and the new looks for Brainiac and Lex Luthor, and that would be the first appearance, I think, of the power suit, the power armor. There's a few more things from the 80s. Then there was the Nom. I read a few issues of the Nom and talked about those. I read the first, I talked about 6 or 7 issues of The Question. Let's see, what else? Alpha Flight, yes. I read the first 12 issues of Alpha Flight and talked about all of those. And then there were some issues of X-Men that I talked about, specifically the first meeting of the X-Men and Doctor Doom. From the 1990s, there wasn't too much. There was a couple stories, Wolverine stories from Marvel Comics Presents. There was some issues of Our Man, which were from the late 90s. And then there was a Gambit miniseries that I talked about. From the 2000s, You've got The Exterminators, which was a Vertigo Vertigo series. I think I've read the first 2 collections of that. I have the 3rd one. I do want to get back to that and read more of that. There was Mechanics, which was a Kitty Pryde miniseries, which I thought was okay. I bought it in large part because it was because Juan Babio was the one who drew it. He also drew some issues of the She-Hulk about 10 years ago that I really liked, but it wasn't quite the same. It just, I don't know, his art had changed by the time he got to She-Hulk, and I thought it was much more effective on She-Hulk. Maybe that had something to do with the inker. And then the last thing from the 2000s would be Hard Time, and that was that prison drama, teenage prison drama, which I'm not done with yet. There's going to be more on that. I think I only talked about the first 6 issues so far, but I have recorded more that will be coming out soon on the next 6 issues of Hard Time. I didn't talk a whole lot about independent comic books. I don't count Vertigo as independent comic books. I don't think I read anything from Dark Horse or Image, but at this point I don't really consider them to be independents. They're not DC or Marvel, but they're not independents either. They're just too established. I did talk about Dames in the Atomic Age. I talked about Pax of the Low Country. I don't know if they ever released any more issues of that. There were supposed to be, I think, 5 issues altogether, but I'm not sure what happened to that. And there were some other books from Appleseed Con, like the Space book. I think it was the official name was 1-2 Space or something like that, which included, which was just 2 short stories. And there was another science fiction book that I read whose name is escaping me at the moment. Timothy O'Brien was the artist on one of those stories. And these were guys from no, you know what? It wasn't. I was going to say these were guys who were associated with, what's that small press printer whose Kickstarter I supported because in 2013 I read and talked about on the show Super Chicken? No, not Super Chicken. It's the cock with a Glock, but I can't remember what it's called. Oh, God. Okay, maybe I'll remember, or maybe I can look it up while I'm sitting here thinking of other things to talk about. I also talked a little bit about what I bought, not just at conventions, but there was a couple other episodes where I talked about what I bought. I like I mentioned the Lou Fine Treasury before, and there was a couple of other books that I talked about. Let's see, I'm looking for this book that I talked, Bulletproof Chicken, that's what it was. And that was that was October of 2013 that I talked about that. But I really want to try and read some more and talk about some more independent comic books, and I certainly have stuff still from Appleseed and from the Small Press Expo that would fall into that category and qualify as as being independent comics in my mind. I want to talk a little bit. I mean, the cover image. I want to talk about the podcast a little bit now. Actually, you know what? Before I talk about the podcast, I want to talk about the other things that I like to talk about on the podcast, specifically cartoons. I talked a little bit about Justice League. I think I watched Star-Crossed right near the beginning of the year. I've watched a fair amount of Justice League Unlimited, or JOU, during this year, and I'm still in the process of recording episodes about that. Probably be finishing off Season 2 in the next month or two, or at least finishing it off as far as talking about it on the podcast. I'm winding down on Avatar, Season 3, the final season of Avatar, and I'm looking forward to talking some more about that. I talked about it a little bit on the podcast in 2014, not a whole lot, I think just a couple times. I talked a little bit about Batman Beyond and the Batman Beyond movie. I talked about Clone Wars a little bit. Honestly, with Clone Wars, I thought the first half of season 1, which is all that I've watched, season 1, I have watched the entire season. The first half was much stronger than the second half. And that's because I thought the episodes got a little too cute in the second half. I don't know, cute aliens and Jar Jar Binks, and it wasn't quite as exciting or deadly as the first half was. It had its moments, but the first half, I thought, the first 11 episodes, I think, were much stronger on the whole than the second half. I talked a little bit about Superman, the animated series, and kind of like Batman Beyond, Superman, the animated series, in fact, even more so than Batman Beyond, I think. Superman ended on a much stronger note. The third season was excellent. There were some really good episodes in there, most of which I had not seen before. Let's see, I talked about Futurama. I'm still watching Futurama. I have not finished that off yet. I am about 90 to 100 episodes into that. I'm not sure how many episodes that leaves me, but that's one show I should get back to soon. And I should probably try and talk about that more on the podcast. It can be a little hit or miss, but it's a good show. And I'm still watching Young Justice. I'm still holding out hope that they will put season 2 of Young Justice on Netflix. I have watched season 1 in its entirety, but I'm in the process of going back through season 1, hoping that by sometime in the next 6 months they'll release season 2. So that's about it as far as cartoons go. I only covered 3 movies in 2014, and those were Dread, which I thought was excellent. And if you want to hear more about that, go back and listen to that episode. I talked about Batman Beyond, The Return of the Joker, which I thought was amazing. It's head and shoulders the best Batman Beyond there is. It's just such a great episode. It's the animation is so much better than it is on the TV show. Does a decent job, but the animation in the movie is just a much higher quality. And I thought the story was much better, and really, if you want to hear more about that, go back and listen to that episode. Look for that episode in the. Let's see. So I already talked about the comics. Oh, and then I also talked about Super, which technically was not a comic book movie, but it was about a superhero, and yeah, that was excellent. Movie, and I thought it was a very good movie, worth my time, certainly since it was available on Netflix. And if you want to hear more, listen to the episode. Okay, now talking about the behind the curtain kind of stuff, or some of this is visible to people listening to the show if they're checking out the website, and that is the cover image. I've always used a cover image for this. At first, I was trying to paste images together using several images, but somewhere around episode 35 or 37, maybe 33, I'm not sure, somewhere in the 30s, I decided to go with just a single image. I was just spending too much time on pulling images together. Maybe even the single image is too much, but I kind of like the way the cover images look now. I like the font that I've started to use for that, and I don't know, it may sound a little silly, but that's how I feel. The website, I'm kind of changing the way things are set up on the website. That's evolving a little bit. I've actually instead of just having the blog layout as what you see when you go to DaveTalksComics.com, I now have a front page. You will see the blog entries, which are, of course, the episodes on the right side, going down the right side, and you can click there to get to one of those. But I also have links that at the moment are linking to tags or based on tags. So there'll be a link for, like, say, X-Men or Batman. And then that'll take you to that will filter the blog for the episodes that are tagged with X-Men or Batman, and so on and so forth. I may change that a little bit. I have added an episode guide this year, which the look has evolved over the course of the year. I'm at a point where I think I really like it, where it's got a small image, and then next to the small image, it has a short description, much shorter than what you get on the blog page for that episode, of what's in the episode or what I discussed in the episode, and then you can actually click and play the episode right there. And I think I'm going to start adding a download link as well, in case people want to do that. And, honestly, I'm not sure how people get this show, whether they are subscribing through iTunes or some other RSS feeder type source, or if they are going to the episode page or the website and downloading there, or going to Libsyn, or going to Stitcher, or one of the other places. Or I think that's about it as far as places I have it available. Of course, it's all through Libsyn. Let's see, what else? Oh yeah, well, in talking about the evolution of the page, I changed things quite a bit around September. I decided to, at first I didn't, I now have, the main page is at davetalkscomics.com, but that is just, that is davetalkscomics.blogspot.com, and just davetalkscomics.com redirects to davetalkscomics.blogspot.com. It's a mouthful. So I set that up in September, and prior to that it had all been through Libsyn.com, and so when you went to the main page it went to Libsyn, and so that changed in mid to late 2014. And I don't think I'm going to move it anywhere else as of right now. I may change the look of it a little bit. I want to have a few more images. One thing that I noticed with the episode guide is that the way I have it set up, at least for the episodes, and I think I've just the episodes 51 through 59 at this point are done this way, is that you have of course, like I said, the image and then the description and the links, image on the left, description and links on the right. Is that if you look at it, if I try looking at it on my cell phone, it doesn't, the image doesn't really show up, or it's shrunk down, so that doesn't completely work. But on my tablet, and on a desktop or a laptop, it seems fine. Download numbers. I haven't talked about this at all. I'm not really too hung up on the download numbers. I'll be honest with you, I'm not getting a ton of downloads, but that doesn't really bother me. I don't do this podcast to get listeners. I mean, it would be nice to get some feedback, and the feedback I've gotten has been rare. It's been few and far between. But at the same time, I'm not really advertising it too heavily. I post the episode links on the Comic Forums, which is the Comic Geek Speak forums, in their Pimp Your Podcast thread. And I've been doing that for quite a while now, or at least I think all of 2014, or almost all of 2014. But that's about it. Yeah, I don't really post, and I post it on Facebook. But that's really it. I don't post anywhere else. And, I mean, honestly, the reason why I podcast is because I want to remember these things. I want to have something to listen to years from now, so I can remember, to remind myself of what I read and what I thought about what I read, and maybe give me reason to go back and reread some of these things. And, honestly, I do listen to some of my episodes again. And especially if I'm going to talk about something that I have talked about before, like if I'm picking up on something that, like, I read the first 6 issues and I'm coming back for the next 6, sometimes I want to listen to it to hear, because I can't remember everything I said. And I want to make sure I'm not just repeating what I said before. And, I want to try to build on what I said before. And the other thing is, sometimes if I listen to a podcast where somebody else's podcast where they're talking about something that I have talked about, sometimes I'll go back and listen to hear what I had to say about it, to hear if I covered those same things, or if there was some insight that I had that they didn't have, or So that's really why I podcast, and I listen to a lot of comic book podcasts. I look, obviously I can't listen to them all. I have kind of cut back on some of the longer ones. I don't listen to as many of the long comic book podcasts that I used to. And by long, I mean really ones that go regularly in the hour and a half to longer range. I listen to some of them, but I don't listen to as many as I used to, and I do listen to more that are in the half hour to an hour range than I used to. I think I talked about this a little bit, but I want to. There's certain things that I want to try to cover in 2015. For instance, Hard Time, that series by Steve Gerber and Brian Hurtt, I think it was. I want to finish that off. I want to read season 2. There's an episode coming up which will cover the second half of the initial 12 issues. I want to read more Doom Patrol. There was just too much time between the first and the second volume and the second and the third. I definitely want to read at least one archive, the fourth archive of the Silver Age Doom Patrol. Let's see, looking back through the things I've covered, I want to try and finish off Hourman. I have most of the issues. I'm missing one. I need to buy that. Let's see. What else? Well, there's more cartoons that I want to watch and talk about. I've started to watch more anime. There was a period when I watched a lot of anime, and I kind of got off that train, and now I'm back on that track, and I want to talk about anime. I watched some of it on Netflix, and I also got a subscription to Crunchyroll, and I've started to watch some anime on there, including some old anime from the 1970s, which is dated, but I still like it because it reminds me of some of the stuff I watched when I was growing up, because the cartoons I'm watching right now are stuff that I watched back in the day, that I saw when they were first coming out. And I also want to talk about Arrow, because I have been watching Arrow, and I'm way behind. I'm only in season 1, but I want to talk about Arrow. I want to continue to talk about the cartoons that I have been talking about, that I'm continuing to watch. I want to cover some more movies. There are some Marvel films that I have not seen yet that have come out in the last couple years, like the second Thor film, the second Captain America film, Guardians of the Galaxy. I want to record an episode on Batman, the Michael Keaton Batman films, because I watched them recently. What else do I want to cover? I certainly want to read some more war comics, I think. I want to read some more Alpha Flight. I want to get back to Scalped. It's been too long. And I'm sure there's a Fantastic Four Visionaries Volume 1. I would like to read that. Maybe some EC comics. Some of those big, beautiful reprints, which... who's doing them now? It used to be that company that Steve Geppi owns, but I don't think it is. I think it's Dark Horse that's doing the EC reprints now. I would like to read at least 1 or 2 of those. But there's just so much out there to read, and I'm not even scratching the surface as far as new stuff goes. I mean, I don't read anything that's new. But anyway, that's kind of a look at how things have gone. I'm hoping to continue with this roughly averaging 4 episodes per month for 2015. March may be a little rough because I have a lot of stuff non-comic book related scheduled. But I'm hoping I'll get at least 3, maybe 4 episodes out in, did I say March? I think I did. I meant January. Yes, I meant January. The first quarter of the year is going to be a little more difficult than other parts of the year, because I have a lot of other stuff going on. But after that, I'm looking forward to recording plenty of episodes and putting plenty more out. And I don't see any reason why it shouldn't be a good year. I'm planning to go back to at least 3 of the 4 shows that I went to this year. Certainly Heroes, Baltimore, and the Small Press Expo, and maybe Appleseed. We'll see. I know that all 4 of those shows will be happening. And, so 2014 was a good year for this podcast. I really took a step up as far as the number of episodes and the amount of stuff I'm covering. I think I could certainly stand to broaden the base of the things I'm covering. Maybe I could dig back into my long boxes and read some what are those shows? Those comics, Grimjack, or maybe Dreadstar. I have quite a few issues of those. I'd love to read some of those and talk about those on this show. Or maybe something else. Maybe something I don't have. Who knows? Anyway, that's it for my look back at 2014, at Dave Talks Comics in 2014. A couple more thoughts on 2014 and Dave Talks Comics and looking ahead to 2015. First, looking back, I forgot to mention Hawk World by Tim Truman, which was another 1980s. I think it was 1989 when it came out. It was a 3-issue miniseries. I covered that in an earlier episode of Dave Talks Comics in 2014, of course. And the other thing I wanted to mention was that the small publisher that I couldn't remember was King Bone Press. They're the ones who put out... I can't remember the title again. It's not Super Chicken, but it's the cock with the Glock, whose name I can't recall. Bulletproof Chicken, that's it, Bulletproof Chicken. And, okay, so the other thing I wanted to say was that I'm starting to realize that I can't cover everything that I read. And I'm not sure that I want to talk about everything that I read, but I want to talk about most of it, at least to some degree. And honestly, I just don't have the time. I've already got about 4 or 5 episodes stockpiled to go next. So in other words, I've already recorded the next 4 episodes. And I just can't, I just don't have the time to record, especially since I've started doing the Who's Ohatmu feature, where I go through the Who's Who and the Ohatmu, the official handbook of the Marvel Universe, and I talk about my recollections of things that I find in there, and also sometimes stuff I'd like to read, and I'm not keeping up with that at anywhere near the pace I originally wanted to. I at the rate I'm going, it's going to take me a decade or more to get through that. So it's just going to kind of be an ongoing project, and hopefully I'll get to do an episode on that every month or 2, but at that pace there's no way. And when I say an episode, and I'm talking like 5 episodes probably to get through an issue of one of those, or to get through an issue of each of those series. So I don't see me making any serious headway through that unless I keep up with this for a long, long time. In addition to that, I want to cover other stuff. I want to cover cartoons, and I want to cover some of these other series that I'm reading. And some of these things don't go on for too long. Maybe it'll be 2 or 3 episodes. But the bottom line is I can't talk about everything I read. And some of these things I read, I don't really have that much to say about them because they just don't, I don't know, they just don't seem that deep, or they just don't inspire me enough to want to record that much. But I already have about 5 or 6 things that I want to record on that I haven't, and I'm not even talking about the Who's Ohatmu, that I want to record about that I've read in the last couple months, and I'm just not sure if I can find the time to do them all. But so that's what I wanted to say, was that And I don't know, I may try and do one of those. I think once or twice before I've done episodes where I've just kind of done quick hits. And, okay, I read this, here's what I thought. I read this, here's what I thought. Because I don't feel like spending a whole episode on them, and I'm kind of falling behind. So I might do those in the future. I might do another one of those coming up soon. I might not. I might just kind of let things slag and maybe post about them on the Facebook page or something like that. I don't know. At facebook.com/DaveTalksComics. Yeah, so I think that's about it for now. So I hope you guys had a great 2014. If you've been listening all along, thank you. If you just started listening, thank you. Next episode, I will be talking about the Micronauts again. Special edition, issues 2 and 3. And after that, it'll be Hard Time. After that, I'll be talking about Daredevil Born Again. And after that, it'll be another Whozo Hotmu episode. So that's the next 4 episodes coming up. And I got plans to record other stuff, but I haven't recorded anything else yet. That's it for episode 60 of Dave Talks Comics. I didn't really use them for this episode, but I should probably still mention that there are 2 websites that I like to use when I'm preparing for episodes, and those are comicbookdb.com and the Grand Comics Database. Both great resources, whether you're just curious and trying to find something out, or preparing for a podcast like I quite often am. If you want to leave questions or comments, you can do that at DaveTalksComics.com or at Facebook.com/DaveTalksComics. I'm on Twitter at DaveTalksComics, and my email address is DaveTalksComics@gmail.com. I'm Dave. Thank you for listening. Yeah, I guess next up is the outro, and I can't recall off the top of my...
Dave Talks Comics.
Uh-oh, no,
59.
that wasn't supposed to happen. Ha ha. Let's see.